bit more of that Michigan grit and values in Washington.
We've got to fight back hard against Trump and Musk with a hell of a lot more than paper paddles and broken promises.
Abdul El-Sayed is running for U.S. Senate in Michigan. Detroit's former top health official is aiming to replace outgoing Democratic Senator Gary Peters.
The 40-year-old is not a newcomer to politics. He ran in 2018 to become the Great Lakes state's governor, but ultimately lost. All eyes will be on Michigan next year as it's poised to be a prime pickup opportunity. El-Sayed has already earned the endorsement of Senator Bernie Sanders.
Joining us now is Democratic candidate Abdul El-Sayed. Welcome to Rising.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be with you all.
Great to have you. Why don't you start by telling us why you have decided to run for Senate?
Look, it just shouldn't be this hard to live in the most powerful country in the history of the world. It shouldn't be this hard to afford your groceries or see a doctor without worrying about going into medical debt. It shouldn't be this hard to take a big deep breath or drink your water without worrying about whether or not what's going into your body is going to make you sicker rather than give you health. It shouldn't be this hard to look up from your phone because some massive trillion-dollar corporation is spending billions of dollars to make sure that you keep looking and not looking your loved ones and your family in the eye. All of these things shouldn't be that hard. And the reason they are is because we have a politics that have been devastated by corporations and billionaires and oligarchs in ways that have our government working for them rather than working for us. And I think right now we see the worst of that in Donald Trump. We've got to stand up and fight back against them. But we also got to remember what we fight for. And I've been in public service in Michigan here for nearly 10 years. And what people are telling me, whether you're in Flint or Detroit or you're up north in the Upper Peninsula, people are talking about what you fight for, whether or not you can build an economy that works for working people, make it easier to start a small business, whether or not they can afford housing or go see a doctor without getting sick. And so we got to fight back, but we also have to fight for a future that works for folks. That's the work that I've been doing my whole career. I rebuilt the health department, restructured another one, done things like erased medical debt for 300,000 people, $700 million worth, put Narcan in over 100 locations in Michigan's largest, most diverse county, built an air quality monitoring network so folks could hold polluters accountable. I think these are the kinds of things we want our government to deliver for us, and I'm hoping to do that in the U.S. Senate.
Well, Dr. El-Sayed, as the former top health official in your state, I don't have to tell you that healthcare and the Make America Healthy Again movement has occupied a central place in a lot of people's minds recently. Tell us what you make of what the secretary has described as an urgent need to take fluoride out of water, his take on vaccines, and how much is healthcare playing a role in what you're selling to the people of Michigan?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I literally wrote the book on Medicare for All. I think there's a huge trust gap that we've seen when it comes to healthcare. I'll give you an example from the pandemic. People living in America right now, if you need insulin, you worry about where you're going to get your next vial because we've seen the price of it go up and up and up. And then all of a sudden in this pandemic, you've got folks coming to you with a medication that didn't exist a year ago for a disease you don't have when they've been missing on providing you a medication for a disease you have, a medication you know you need that's been out of reach for you. And so that trust gap that develops when y'all show up on the problems you think are problems versus showing up on the problems that we think are problems has been exploited by people like RFK. There are a lot of things that I actually agree with RFK on in terms of the nature of the problem. I agree that we need to do something about ultra-processed foods. I agree that we need to take on the food corporations that have devastated our food environment. I agree that healthcare should be about our well-being and not the well-being of a pharmaceutical CEO's back pocket because their stock price is going up. I agree with those things. But the problem is this. Every single situation when it comes to pain in our society, what you've seen out of Trump and his acolytes has been an exploitation of the problem to deliver solutions that tend to be self-serving or ham-fisted or chaotic. And when it comes to RFK, it's exactly the same. I think his diagnosis of the problems are right, but I think he's been known to exploit those problems and the mistrust that exists out there to sell what has ultimately been snake oil. I mean, somebody in the midst of a measles epidemic that you have to convince to say that the MMR vaccine is safe and effective and the best single way to protect yourself from measles, they shouldn't take convincing. Similarly, when it comes to fluoride, the issue is not fluoride in the water. Like if you're serious about IQ, which he seems to say he's serious about, then maybe bring back the lead program that they shuttered at the CDC that, by the way, in Milwaukee, and when they've got a lead problem in schools, they can't seem to get a real answer from the CDC because they shut down that program. So it's the right problems, the wrong solutions. And that's the same thing that you've seen from Trump. He was able to exploit a lot of folks' economic pain to get elected so that he could tank the global economy and then deliver a stock tip to his billionaire buddies who made $300 billion when he finally pulled back on his devastating use of tariffs. So unfortunately, right problems, wrong solutions with these guys.
Keeping on this theme of the health issues in America, one I think challenge for democratic governance is a loss of trust in institutions and in many Democratic leaders of states in terms of how COVID was handled, in terms of the policies of lockdown, schools being closed for too long, conflicting and contradictory guidance on masks and mandates and all of that sort of thing. I know a lot of our viewers at Rising are very animated about what they would consider to be COVID overreach and a distrust of elites and Democrats, particularly for that reason. What are your thoughts on this subject? This is something RFK Jr. Taps into as well, and I don't, personally agree with everything he has to say on this subject, certainly. But I have also come away, over the last few years with more distrust of experts and elite consensus on health issues because of, what I saw happen I'm actually a resident formerly of Michigan. Michigan is my home state. And I was really horrified by how many things were shut down for so long, include outdoor spaces, mandates, all of that sort of thing.
Look, I certainly understand why folks are frustrated about the COVID postscript. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that 1.5 million people died of COVID-19. This was a terrible tragedy brought on by a virus. Now, the hard part about this is this. We have now all the information we need. We fully characterize this virus. We understand what we're dealing with. And we can look back and say, there were mistakes that were made about what would have been most effective by balancing all of the other pieces that we should be considering whenever you engage in a public health intervention. What is the impact going to be on the most vulnerable people in our society? What's the impact going to be on our economy? And those are important questions to take seriously. I will also say that we are engaging in a bit of Monday morning quarterbacking. I think what we assume is that this was about public health leaders trying to take power, for their own sake. And I worry that might not actually be giving them the full credit of the situation they were in. A lot of us were looking at a scenario where we had a virus that had never been seen before, that had come out of a country where they were not being completely transparent about the situation, trying to protect people at a time when thousands of people were dying every day. Our hospitals in big cities were being overrun by the virus. And in that situation, it's really, really difficult to make decisions that are going to consider all the long-term impact of choices. Now, I think we've learned a lot about how to handle pandemics from that situation, but I don't want us to be playing Monday morning quarterback here in the sense that we assume that they then had all the information we now might have. I think that coming out of this experience, moving forward, I think what we really need is governance that we can trust. It's really hard to disaggregate a lot of what came out of the COVID pandemic from who the president was at the time. I think had you had a president where you knew that this man was taking account of the evidence and was putting Americans' lives and well-being up front rather than his political prospects because of the stock market up front, then I think folks would have been able to have a lot more trust in public officials. I think the fact that we had such unstable, rickety, ham-handed, self-serving leadership at the time made it so that underneath there was a lot of disagreement about what to do. Everything got politicized. And what happens when things get politicized is that people tuck into their specific corners. You saw a red state approach and a blue state approach. And what we all want is a scientific approach. And so, thinking about what we've learned from the pandemic, I really want us to be ready for the next one, which is to say, let's take all the evidence from this one and make sure we're ready to go if something like this were to ever happen again. I'm worried, though, right, that right now, again, under the Trump administration, you're seeing a gutting of public health institutions in a time where you have a massive measles outbreak that's growing, a disease that we had thought we'd eradicated a long time ago, and you've got diseases like H5N1 that could, in fact, go human to human. And so this is not the time to pull back entirely from public health. This is the time to lean in and integrate the lessons that we learned from the last one so we can do it better next time if something like that were to happen again.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We really appreciate that perspective, especially from a health professional. We really appreciate you joining the show today.
Thanks for having me.
What's keeping Michelle Obama up at night? Trump might have something to do with it. That's next.